In this episode of the podcast, we have another birth story, but this one is from a dad's perspective. Welcome to the All About Pregnancy and Birth podcast. I'm Dr. Nicole Calloway Rankins, a board-certified OB GYN who's been in practice for nearly 15 years. I've had the privilege of helping over 1,000 babies into this world, and I'm here to help you be calm, confident, and empowered to have a beautiful pregnancy and birth. Quick note, this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not a substitute for medical advice. Check out the full disclaimer at drnicolerankins.com/disclaimer. Now let's get to it. Well, hello there. Welcome to another episode of the podcast. This is episode number 91. Thank you for being here with me today. So in this episode of the podcast, we have another birth story, and this time it's from a dad's perspective. This is the second time that I've had a dad on. My husband, Falcon, was the first dad on the podcast back in episode number 81. But Rick's episode is actually the first episode that I recorded with a dad because it took me a while to convince my husband to be on. Rick and I actually recorded this episode back in June. And Rick is Rick Mulready. He is the host of the Art of Online Business podcast, and he is an industry-leading expert in teaching online experts how to optimize their online business to take them to the next level. And his expertise as someone in the online business space is how I know Rick, because he has been a huge part of helping me be successful in this online business space. So I was really excited when Rick agreed to come on. His daughter, Maya, is such a big part of his life and his work. He talks about her a lot and posts a lot on his Instagram about her. And we have a really great conversation. We talk about how his daughter's birth helped him to really clarify his purpose in his work. And he is just really, really honest and keeps it 100% real about everything about being a dad experiencing pregnancy and birth, including how when he proposed to his wife, they actually hadn't discussed kids before he proposed, how he didn't want to see Maya actually be born, and how he resented her, his daughter, for a little bit after she was born, just because of the disruption to things in his life. So you're really going to love this episode. It's just a fun conversation. There's lots of high moments and funny moments in it, and you are definitely going to want your partner to listen to it as well. Now, before we get into the episode, let me do a listener shout out. This is from It's Too Late for Me _save yourself. I hope that's not the case, that it's truly too late for you. I doubt that it is. Well, the title of the review is Just Speak to Me All Day. And the review says, I'm obsessed with Dr. Nicole. She's lovely, down to earth, knowledgeable, and judgment-free. And on top of that, she has the most soothing and beautiful voice. I instantly feel calm when she starts speaking, and even listen to her commercials, which is huge. I fast forward with other pods, and then a laughing emoji. Love the podcast. Thank you for being a part of my pregnancy journey. Well, thank you for that really, really lovely review. I so appreciate you taking the time to leave that for me. It still amazes me when people say that my voice is soothing. I appreciate it, but I'd never in 1,000 years would have thought that. And I also appreciate you inviting me to be a part of your pregnancy journey by listening to this podcast. Now, this podcast is not the only resource that I have. Hint, hint, here comes one of those commercials that you said you listened to. I also have a lot of free resources and downloadable guides on my website. If you go to drnicolerankins.com/resources, I have lots of great things for you there, including a guide to recommended prenatal tests, a guide for managing pain in labor, warning signs to look out for after birth, a guide to help you get started with meditation, because I really strongly believe in meditation. So do head to that page and grab some of those free downloadable guides for you. Again, that's drnicolerankins.com/resources. All right, let's get into the birth story episode with Rick Mulready. Thanks so much, Rick, for agreeing to come onto the podcast and share your perspective as a dad birth story. I'm super excited about it.
I think you told me before that I'm the first dad to be on the show. Is that right?
You will be one of the first dads. Actually, since I first asked you, I got a really important dad to agree, my husband. So he will be the first
and
dad.
Foremost. Well, regardless, I'm honored to be on here. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, for sure. So why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about yourself and your work and your family?
Yeah, so my family, I'm the dad of an amazing daughter who is I don't want to say entering toddlerhood because she's been here for a little while, but she's entering that phase of having an opinion, shall we say. She is she's just about to turn 18 months. Maya is my daughter, and she's just the most amazing thing ever. Yeah, she's just about to turn 18 months. She's into everything. She's tantruming, but it's it's a journey every single day for my wife and I, just learning what she's going through and all that stuff. So it's amazing. My wife is Amy, and this is our first kid. Our plan is our only kid. But that was sort of planned. That was our original intention even before her. And I run my own business where I help online experts, and I classify an online expert like yourself, Nicole, where you have an online program, you have an expertise to share, whether it's a course or a coaching program or a membership or something like that. And I help online experts, optimize their business to 6 and 7 figures, meaning let's get you there quicker. Let's remove the blind spots that so many of us have. We all have because we're so close to our business, and let's remove those. Let's get some momentum in the business and get you creating the business that you really want to create. And one piece of clarity that I've gotten literally over the past 2 weeks or so that is extremely relevant to this conversation here is I've been thinking a lot about my deeper purpose. I've been in business now for 6.5 years. And for the first 4 years, I'm not afraid to say, was like, let's just make a lot of money. I just wanted to hit that 7-figure mark, because, that's the elusive number, if you will, that gets thrown around so much. And I was, very, very grateful to be able to hit that in the first 4 years. And then when I hit it, and I don't mean to diminish it in any way, but it was like, okay, awesome. Now what? and it was really, then over the past couple of years, it's been a journey of like, all right, what am I really doing, and what I really want out of this business? It's always been about helping people grow their business, because I know when they are able to grow their business, they're able to improve so many different things in their life, more freedom. This just opens up so many different options of happiness and all that stuff. What I've gotten really clear on, and this is a lot to do with the birth of Maya, is the deeper purpose of really why I do what I do is because I want to teach and help entrepreneurs grow their business and show them that it's not about hard work. It's not about, let me rephrase that. It doesn't mean that the harder you work or the longer hours that you work, that doesn't equate to the success of your business. I don't mean to say it's not hard work. Just saying and I've had this for so long myself, I equate longer hours, harder work, and then the business is going to grow and revenue is going to increase as a result. When in fact, that's not true. And there's so many examples of that out there. And so what I want to teach and help online entrepreneurs is that money is abundant, and get rid of that limited thinking mindset, because that's what I had. That's what I was, and I talk about this with my wife a lot. That's what I saw growing up with my parents. I came from a very blue collar family. My dad was an auto mechanic. My mom was a pediatric nurse growing up. Then she transitioned into weird transition, but she went into a children's librarian.
Okay.
And so, it was, and I grew up in a small town in New Hampshire. So, and it was all of that. Money doesn't grow on trees. We can't afford that, all this other stuff. And, I look back on it now. Like I said, my dad was an auto mechanic. I remember, I'll never forget I was sitting in our living room and I saw him come in one day from work, and he was all hunched over, and he had his little igloo lunchbox thing in his hand, and he was all hunched over, and he was just in so much physical pain from leaning over the cars and stuff all day that I just saw that pain and anguish on his face, and he was that's where I learned like it's hard work to be making money, and he wasn't making a whole lot of money in doing that. And he passed away when he was 55. I was 25, and he died of colon cancer. And so he was diagnosed at 45. So he fought it for 10 years. I am 100% convinced that the stress of his job, because it's a longer story, but the stress of his job and him losing his job shortened his life. And so that is my deeper purpose now, is that I want to help online entrepreneurs grow their business more quickly, and so that they can show their kids that money is abundant, that it's not about longer hours and harder work, and that's the only way you're going to make more money, because I know that that's going to instill, better self-esteem in them, and a completely different money mindset, and less anxiety, because I struggle with anxiety. And so that's really and this all came about, like I said, after the birth of Maya, and something I've been thinking a lot about. So a longer answer to your question.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's important. Obviously, my show is about pregnancy and birth, but I have a ton of doulas and online childbirth educators who listen to me as well. So I think that's a really great point. And you helped me as well, part of learning how to marry my purpose with being okay with an online business. All that stuff was kind of new to me. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So let's get into the pregnancy and birth of Maya. So let's start off with, what was the experience of pregnancy from your perspective, and prenatal care and doctor's visits and all that stuff?
I was freaked out. To just being honest.
Yes.
And
yes.
If I could, it's going to put some things in perspective here, but I think it's important to talk about is that Amy and I did not do a good job communicating about whether we wanted a kid or not prior to us getting engaged.
Oh, wow.
And so, I'll never forget this. So I proposed to her in Paris, and I'll never forget, we were at Napoleon's tomb. I forget what I forget what the actual building name is, but we were at Napoleon's tomb, and we were outside, and we had just gotten engaged, like literally within the past couple of hours, and the conversation of, are we going to have kids or not? And she was absolutely, and we'd kind of talked about it, but we hadn't really come up with a firm, this is what we're going to do. This is what we want. And I was a little wishy-washy at that point. And holy cow, it was well, we probably should have this conversation prior to a couple hours ago. And so long story short is that we had decided that we would be very much open to it, but leaning more towards yes, absolutely. And then after time went on, it was hell yes, we're going to, we want this. And so one of the most clear memories I have is, looking down at the pregnancy test and seeing the positive, that plus sign there. And it was holy cow, this is real. This is going to happen. And then it was just about, we have no idea what we're doing.
Right. How long were you guys married before she got pregnant?
We were married. Good question. We were married. So we got married in September of 2013. So.
Oh, so you guys had a long time then to just be the two of you.
Exactly.
This was a big change then.
Huge change. Because we're both very independent people, very independent. And so, but there was just such excitement. And, once we found out Amy was pregnant, and, then it was, okay, first doctor's visit comes after what? I think it's, I don't know, 7-8 weeks or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. You got it.
Somewhere around there. And then, confirmed that everything was looking okay. I hadn't understood. I wasn't educated enough to be oh, Amy's pregnant. Cool. We're good. All right, let's start the 9 months sort of thing.
Right.
But because it was that first, the first trimester is really critical, to make sure that everything's okay. And I didn't understand all that. And so I learned all of that, and I was so excited. But then I was also, again, as I mentioned earlier, I've struggled with anxiety and depression for years. that started to creep in because then I was worrying like, oh, is she going to be okay? Like, is the pregnancy going to stick? And I'll never forget that we made it through that period. And my brain was saying, all right, we're done that period. But the anxiety kind of holds on to that and be like, well, are we out of the blue? Like, are we still okay? And so as the doctor's visits went on, and I'll never forget, I literally have it on my phone. I saw it last week, the heartbeat, the first time we heard the heartbeat, like that was just like tears, flowing down my face in the doctor's office. It was just so awesome. And our doctors were great, just answering all the questions that we had. And then I don't remember when it actually happens. Well, you could tell me when we had the ultrasound.
Yeah, around about 20 weeks or so.
Yeah, the first time we had that, like that was just like, holy cow.
Like there's a human being in there.
There's a baby right there. And oh, by the way, we're having a girl, and we did decide to figure out what the sex was. And that was just like such outpouring of emotion for both Amy and me, where it was just amazing. And to see, and it was so cool because whenever we had, any kind of ultrasound done or imaging or whatever, they printed out the images, and we've kept all those. And there's one that is a side, what do you call it? Just like image from
profile. Yeah.
Yeah. It's side profile. Thank you. And it's like, if you look at Maya now and then look at that side profile from one of those first, like it's like spot on, which, well, it's like, well, of course it is, Rick. It's, like it's the same kid, but it's just like so cool to see. And just as time went on and the doctor's visits and then, when you get down to, I think at that point, you're getting down to like, I don't know, eight months or something like that, where the doctor's visits start to get like every week or something like that.
Yeah.
Then that's when I really, the whole excitement and stuff actually started to kick into more of the anxiety again, because sleep is super valuable to me. And I have had asthma and eczema on my skin my entire life. And lack of sleep and stress are my the two biggest things that affect my skin. And so my brain, again, my anxious brain started kicking in, being like, you're not going to sleep for the first, you're going to have terrible sleep for a long time. This is what my brain was saying. You're going to have terrible sleep. And so your skin's going to be terrible and you're going to feel miserable and all this. And so like that negativity, if you will, started kicking in because it was getting more real at that point, even though it had been real for a long time. I think like the impending due date, which my wife was due on December 1st, it was starting to sort of spiral in my head a little bit. And I was just kind of like, at that point, I had friends sending books to me and stuff like that. And I didn't want to read any books.
Interesting.
I didn't want to.
Why is
I didn't want to. Well, I didn't want to read books because I wanted it to be my own experience.
Okay.
Amy and I did sign up for a hypnobirthing class.
Okay.
It was her intention to, try to do with no epidural or anything like that. And so we did this hypnobirthing class, and I want to say it was like, I don't know, 8 or 10 weeks or something like that, where we went every week. And, I resisted it at first because I didn't understand it. I didn't really know, especially at the very beginning. I'm like, I have no idea what hypnobirthing is and that whole process. And so I was very resistant to it, but then it took me a few sessions to kind of get into it and just understand what was going on and how this can help us. But then, kind of as the time went on, again, as I sort of ramped up the anxiety and we got closer, it kind of subsided again because then the excitement took over.
Gotcha.
And so I don't know how far you want me to go, but that was sort of like leading up to it.
Yeah. So do you feel like, I feel like women have a lot of places where they can turn to, whether it's like online groups or friends or other women who've had babies, and there's maybe not as much of a support structure for dads. So a couple things. Do you feel like you were ever ignored in the prenatal visits? Like sometimes dads feel like I'm just sitting in the corner and the doctor doesn't even look at me. Did you ever feel like that was the case?
They did really well with me and acknowledging any questions that I had. I'm not afraid to speak up and ask questions. I never felt like that.
Oh, that's good.
All the doctors, and we didn't have one. We had a primary OB GYN,
right?
But it was we kind of rotated between 2 or 3 of them during the visits.
Gotcha.
And so it wasn't one person that we saw all the time, which, we kind of wished it was, but we tried to schedule it around when that person was seeing patients. But they were always really good with me and always answered questions and always, because like I looked at like this, I mean, it's my wife, my wife is the priority here, right? But at the same time, they were always like, hey, do you have any questions that we can answer? They did a really good job of understanding the process because this is what they do.
Right.
And understand that we have so many questions, and they were always open to it. And they treated me really, really well at the process.
Well, that's great. That's great. Well, then did you feel like, it sounds like you did at least have some friends you could talk to or some sort of outlet for how you were feeling and processing things?
Not really.
Okay.
To be honest with you, this sounds terrible, but I mean, it's the reality. My biggest concern was, one of my big concerns was, hey, my business supports our family. What's going to happen when the baby comes and my time is completely split?
That's a big deal.
Yeah. And so I did have some conversations with some friends of mine who had young kids or even had been through it recently. And I'll never forget, they told me, dude, you're going to become so productive, more productive than you ever have been. And I was like, that doesn't make any sense, right? Because I'm going to have so much less time and I'm going to be exhausted. Like that doesn't make any sense.
Right.
And they were like, well, you have less time. And it's like, it filters out all the other stuff that you realize what you shouldn't be spending your time on.
Yep. Because
you have such limited time, and you're like, you have to be really, really cutting the things that are not important and only focusing on the big, most important things because you have limited time. And I quickly realized that.
You're like, I got an hour right now, and this is what I can do. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I did have a buddy, one of my good buddies in Washington, D.C., who sent me a book. I think it was Ashton Kutcher. Did he write a book?
I think so,
for dads. And I started to read like the first page, and like I appreciated the humor of it, but I also read it because it was like horror story from the get-go. And that's why I made the decision. I'm like, I'm not going to read these books because I don't want to have that preconceived, thing in my mind. Like, this is going to be so terrible. Like, I want to have my own experience. And so from then on, I didn't read any of the books. I will say that we use the Ovia app, and there's a pregnancy Ovia app, and my wife and I were in that every single day. And that was great because it was talking about the types of changes that were happening and stuff like that. I will say this actually before we go on. I think this is really important. This is really cool. Is that, one thing I did learn was that if you play music and hold the music up to my wife's belly, then the baby can start to associate that music. And I was like, what? Like, come on, really? And so I was like, what the heck? I'm going to start doing this. And so I'm a huge fan of the TV show Friday Night Lights. I've seen it I've seen the entire series like 5 times. And the music in that is really, really cool. It's instrumental music and stuff like that. So I picked a song called Your Hand in Mine.
Aww.
And I would play that on my phone, and I would hold it right up to my wife's stomach, and I would just lay my head on her. And whenever I played it, she would kick. And she would move around.
Right.
And we'll come back to that, but just like I tried that, and it was so cool, the reaction of the baby in there, what was happening. And that was just kind of like, you hear things like, all right, try this. I'm like, all right, cool. I'm going to try that.
Yeah, that is really cool. So was there anything that you felt like you wanted for the experience of the birth? I mean, I'm like, most dads are like, I want to cut the cord, or some dads aren't. Was there anything that you felt like you wanted?
I wanted it to be a short, like a 3-hour labor.
Oh, Rick, you got jokes.
For my wife to be like, oh, this is easy. And to happen at 11 a.m.
Yeah.
I wanted all of that. None of that happened. No, like in all seriousness, like I really was unsure about cutting the cord. I yeah, like, because I went kind of back and forth on it. At
Right.
first, I was like, "Hell no, I'm going to cut that cord," and then I was like, "Yeah, this is my daughter being born. I want to cut the cord." And then I was
Right.
like, "No," and so I didn't make that decision until actually right before. I don't mean like hours, but like shortly before she was born, I did make that decision. Like, yeah, I'm going to cut the cord. Outside of that, I had no idea what to expect, and so I was like, I'm going to go with it, and just kind of go along.
Right. Right. And so did you feel like you were ready to be like her support person based on what you learned in the hypnobirthing class? Like, were you paying attention or were you just like,
I was paying
okay.
attention. Yes. They were evening classes and I don't do well in the evening, but yes, I was paying attention. Yeah, I think that I had done, I felt like, and I told you right before we got recording here that I asked my wife about this last night. I said, I want to be on Nicole's podcast tomorrow talking about this whole thing. Like, do you remember anything specifically that I did or didn't do? And she said, you were super supportive and caring during the whole pregnancy. And so I feel like I was, and I tried to be, I did certainly got frustrated at times because like, I'll remember back, like I remember cooking like hamburger in the kitchen. And during pregnancy, my wife's sense of smell went through the roof. I was like, seriously, you could smell that? And she's like, it's disgusting. Stop. Like you can't cook. I'm like, what? Like, what do you
Right.
mean I can't cook this? And I was like, wait, I can't cook ground beef in here for 9 months,
And it's
So
like, no, you can't. Like,
yeah, it was just like, all right, I'm going to lose this battle. And it was just more, it was like stuff like that. But yeah, I feel like I feel like I was as supportive as possible during that. And, I can be a little bit sensitive sometimes. And my wife warned me early on. She's like, you need to know that like when we're in the hospital, nothing is personal. Like nothing is personal. And I was like, okay, and I just seeing her go through the process, I'm glad that she glad that she said that to me because it's, stuff was happening that I had no idea was going to be happening.
right, right. So let's talk about what happened. What was the labor experience like?
Yeah. So she was 2 weeks late. So we went into, Maya wasn't born until the 15th
Oh, wow.
of December. So she was 2 weeks after her due date. And so they induced on the 13th.
Okay.
And I'll never forget. So we had to go in at, and I thought, again, working off of like nice, comfortable hours, I'm thinking, oh, we'll go in for induction at like 9 a.m. or something. No, we had to report to the hospital like 10:30 p.m. on a Thursday night.
Yep.
I was like, what? Like, okay. And so we went in there and started the process, and nothing really happened until starting to like the next day. So she was in labor for, I want to say like 36 hours because she wasn't born until Saturday afternoon at like almost like 5 till 3 in the afternoon Pacific time. And so nothing really happened for the most part, through the night on Thursday into Friday. She started to have more contractions and stuff like that. We hit Friday night and holy cow, things change really quickly. And again, remember, she's wanting the decision was that she didn't want to do any kind of epidural. She was open to it, but she really wanted to make an effort not to use. That was just her choice. And we had been working with a doula. There's a doula pair here in San Diego that were just amazing.
Okay.
And so that was super helpful. Again, another, you asked me earlier about a resource. I was always asking them questions and stuff like that. And
so were they there with you in the hospital, or one of them there with you?
Well, so it's a great question because, you go into like trying to figure out when to go into the hospital, or
right.
when, like once you're in the hospital, when are they needed sort of thing.
Right.
Once we hit that Friday night, and, there's no epidural at this point. And I've never seen, do you want me to sugarcoat things?
I mean, go let's put it on out there.
Like I've never seen her in more pain. Like it was just so heartbreaking to see Amy in that much pain.
And it's one of the things that I have to explain to family members. It's really hard to see someone in that much pain. It really is. Like for us, it's normal, and we know that that's like a normal part of labor, but it can be really hard to see someone in pain like that.
It was. And I've known, at that point, I'd known Amy for 8.5 years. And I just, obviously had never seen her in that kind of pain before. And just her struggling and doing all the stuff that we had learned in the hypnobirthing and what the doula had taught us and so forth. And so this is probably, I don't know, 12 midnight or something, 11 p.m. midnight, somewhere in that. It's all blurred to me at this point, but somewhere in that ballpark on that Friday night. And at this point, I've been watching Amy go through what she's doing, trying to help and support in however way I can. At this point, like, I want the doula there, right? Because like this is her expertise. She knows exactly what to do. I don't know what to do. Like, I don't know necessarily how to support her, and Amy's not in a place necessarily to be communicating with me, to be sharing that. And so I'm texting the doula and kind of just giving her an update of what's going on. And it was more like, okay, just kind of keep me updated. And I got, to be honest with you, I got really frustrated. I was like, I want you here. Like, right, this is what we hired you for. Like, don't keep pushing me off. But now I understand that, because she knew, she's been through it whatever number of times, like, she understood what was going on. But at the same time, I did get to a point where I was like, I'd very much like you to commit now, and at this point it was like, I don't know, 2 a.m. or something like that. And we're going through again, like, no sleeping. And there was a little bed in the hospital room that was like the most comfortable thing ever. And so I did try to sleep because the nurses had said, this would be a good time for you to try and get some sleep. I didn't sleep at all. Finally, Amy had gotten to a point where she's like, you know what? And the doula was here, by the way, at this point. It was 4 a.m, and that's when Amy said, like, let's do the epidural. I don't want to continue to feel like this. So I'd heard how big the epidural was, and I was like, "There's zero chance I'm watching this, like, to get put in."
Like, I'm out. Like, I can't do it.
And actually, they said that the nurses told me that they could, so they have to order. I don't know what the person's called, like the epidural person.
Yeah, the anesthesiologist.
Yeah, to come over, and they were like, "All right, you need," like, they actually brought a chair in. They said, "You need to sit down," and they said, "We want you to turn away." And I was like, you don't have to ask me twice. And, and again, this is another thing, like, I just didn't understand. Like, I didn't understand, like, what they were, like, what exactly they were doing, and what was going on at that point. And so I remember that what I was concerned with was that, and this, you're like, well, of course, but she's still having contractions at this point.
Yeah.
But yet they're trying to get the epidural going.
Yep.
It's like, how does that work without hurting her? You know what I mean?
That's when you need a great anesthesiologist who can do it quickly.
Exactly. And she did really, really well, she being the anesthesiologist. And Amy did well too, because she was trying as much as possible to control it. And holy cow, after the epidural kicked in, and I don't remember, like, I would say within an hour or so, life changed. Amy, like, laid back to rest, and it was so much. And she's like, "Oh my God, I feel so much better." And she actually got some sleep. And I remember myself, I was like, "All right, I'm gonna lay down." I didn't really sleep, but I laid down in the room there on the bed, uncomfortable bed. And it wasn't until late morning. It wasn't like she slept all the way through, but like late morning, things started to pick up a little bit. Is that where you want me to go with this?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, let's do it.
And so things started to pick up, and slowly more nurses started to show up in the room. And so I was like, holy cow, we're getting close.
This is like go time, right?
Yeah, it's go time. But then, but again, you, like, never know. Like, it seems like it's moving forward, and then, that, like, so, but then when they call, like, the main doctor, and, like, and the doctor's checking and stuff like that, and so forth, and giving update on dilation and all that stuff.
Right.
And that was the other thing too, is like I didn't fully understand the varying degrees of the dilation. I'm like, wait, like like cervix, or like I had,
like what is
yeah,
that?
and
6
that was
centimeters, 8 centimeters? What are we talking about?
exactly. And then like, at what point should I start to be like, get ready and all, so that was another thing that, again, the doctors and nurses were great with the questions and answering those questions and stuff like that. So things started to pick up around noonish or so. And so she was born at 5 till 3, but like, 2 o'clock ish, again, the nurses are in there. There's a whole bunch of nurses and they're getting ready and they're like, all right, it's go time. And it took a little while, but again, the epidural had been going for a while at that point. And Amy, she was in pain, but nothing like she was in before. And I could just see her getting so excited and really enjoying the process that it settled me down, because, and I was right there with her. And then,
so were you like, how long did she push for? Like, were you helping while she was pushing?
I mean, I was helping from the perspective of like, I was next to her right there holding her hand.
Gotcha.
But I mean, the room had probably like 9 nurses in there. Like it was a ton of people in that room.
Were you at a teaching hospital?
Was I at a teaching hospital? I don't think so.
Okay. Usually it's only like a couple people in there.
I actually think that we requested not to allow.
Right.
I think that was, I remember that we did request like no
like student learners or anything like that.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
Against it, like we just didn't.
Yeah.
That was just a decision we had made.
Yeah.
And the room had, I swear to God, it had probably 7 or 8 people in there, like the main doctor, and then there's a whole bunch of nurses and stuff like that.
Right.
And I don't know if it was a case of like we hit it at a time where there were no other births going on at that very time, that there was extra hands on, and it had been going for 36 hours at that point, so they were all excited it was finally happening. I don't know, but I remember there being a whole bunch of people there, and they were getting things set up, and they got the tray there, and I don't know what you call it, like the metal bucket, or I don't know.
Yeah, got all this stuff. Yep.
Everything, and I'm fascinated of like what is going on here.
Right.
And so she pushed for, I want to say it really wasn't that long. It was like 20 minutes.
Oh, dang.
Yeah, it was very, and I could be, that's what it seemed like to me. Amy,
sure,
like, really
sure.
20 minutes? But she'll tell you, she said like it wasn't that like on the, I want to say like the second or third really big series of pushes. And she's a fitness trainer. And so she's in really good shape. So like the breathing part came very easy to her, and just her ability to push. I remember the nurses saying like, well, you really know it. Like you really have this down. You got great lung capacity, and like you're making great progress when you do this. And I'll never forget. I mean, obviously, like when finally they were like, all right, push. We can see the baby. Now, one thing they did ask me, they said, do you want to touch the head?
Yeah.
As it's coming out? I was like,
right.
Hell no. I was like, no, thank you. I don't want to do that. I also don't want to see.
I was going to say, were you watching?
I was no, I was up near her head. That is now that I think about that, you asked me like, was there anything I wanted? I was like, I'm not going to watch her come out.
Right.
I don't want to ruin anything for the future. I don't want that was one thing. I'm like, I'll be right there.
I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
Right.
I'll be at your head. And, Amy did reach down and feel her head coming out, and they were like, do you want to, I'm like, no, I'm good up here. I'll be the support system above the sheet. Right. And, but then when Maya came out, I mean, then it's just like a complete loss of, like just complete emotional for me. Like I had just tears running down my face, and it was the most amazing thing. And for me, it was like, this is what she looks like after almost 10 months of all this. And it was so cool. And I did cut the cord. I will say though that, and this, I'm sure that lots of people go through this, but when she came out, she wasn't like crying at this point, and she was purple, and I freaked out.
Yeah.
I was like, is she okay?
Right.
You know,
Right.
and then I think that, they cleared some stuff out of her, and then she just like kicked in and she was
Wailed
fine.
yeah.
But that was just that momentary like, like, oh my, is she okay? So another one of those things again that I don't really know anything about, but they're like, yeah, she's purple, but that's normal because the blood is starting to circulate even more so. And, then I started thinking about afterwards, like what an experience for her coming out. She's all comfortable in there for the past,
Yep.
10 months or so.
And then it's like, what
And
the
then,
heck?
yeah, then she's out here with a whole bunch of people looking at her and like, what is going on? And yeah, and then they put that ointment in her eyes.
Did they leave her did they leave her with your wife, like on her chest for a while?
They did. That was something that was very important to us, that we wanted that skin to skin as quickly as we could. We didn't want them unless there was, some sort of medical necessity that she needed to be taken out for any kind of reason for whatever. We wanted that skin to skin right off the bat. And yeah, she went right to Amy's chest and was there. It was for a good, 20 minutes or so. And I'll just never forget, I'm just like, my head was down there on Amy's shoulder, just like looking and like wanting just to touch Maya, and just like looking at like, holy cow, there's this little being here. And I was just an emotional mess in a good way.
Yeah.
And then in one of my favorite pictures that I have that happened next was like, so I got to hold her. I sat down in the chair, took my shirt off, and she was just laying on my chest. And she's just like this little tiny thing on my chest, and I'm just looking down at her, and it was amazing. I mean,
that's really
it was so cool.
Yeah, that's really special. Do you feel like the hospital staff pretty quickly gave you guys some space and time to like bond as a family, or were there people in and out of the room?
No, they were pretty good. They were good about that. I felt like I wanted to hold her a little bit more at that time because, she'd already been on Amy's chest for about 20 minutes or so. And then I took her, it was only for like, I don't know, 10 minutes or so, but then they wanted to weigh her and measure her and all that stuff. And then she went right back to Amy. And so I kind of wanted more of that. But at the same time, I also understood the importance of like, hey, they need to weigh her and they need to measure her and
right.
and all this other stuff. And so, yeah, I got it, but I know, of course, I think I wanted more time to do that. But I also understood the importance of what was going on too.
Yeah. So then now you have this brand new baby. What were the first like a few weeks like of being a new dad?
Yeah. So first of all, we moved from, I don't know what you call it, I guess like the birthing wing of the hospital over to like
the postpartum area. Yep.
Yeah, postpartum area. And the rooms there are really, really nice at the hospital we were at Kaiser. But of course, we have no idea what we're doing as parents. Like just zero idea. And again, from like I haven't slept, and of course Amy hasn't slept a whole lot. And I'll never forget that first night where Maya was just bawling. We have no idea why, right? We're trying to learn how to swaddle, like do the swaddle thing. I could probably do it now, but holy cow, that was one of the hardest things to learn how to do. But I'll never forget, like, we didn't know what to do. And so we're like, should we call the nurse? But it was just like, we didn't call the nurse because it was like, no, this is kind of like normal things that we need to learn. It wasn't like a medical, it wasn't like something was wrong, but it was more of like, we didn't know what to do.
Right.
And so I want to go back to that, the fact that I was holding that I used to hold the phone up to Amy's stomach with that song from Friday Night Lights.
Yeah.
So we were in that first night in the hospital and Maya's just going like crying like crazy. We have no idea why she's crying so much, and we can't calm her down and console her. So we're both Amy and I are both sitting in her hospital bed there. And I'm holding on to Maya. And actually, no, Amy was holding on to Maya. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to try it. I'm going to try the phone. I'm going to try the song. And I turned the song on and she immediately stopped crying.
Oh, wow.
Because part of what I would talk to her about when she was inside of Amy was like, and I played the music, I said, when you hear this, this is going to be, a calming cue for you, or what, I forget exactly what I said, but this, you're going to relax, and this is going to be sort of your cue that it's okay. And so that night, that first night, I turned my phone on, pulled the song up, and she immediately stopped crying. And both Amy and I just like started crying.
Of course.
Because we were like, holy cow, she actually heard this. Yeah. She remembers that she associated. And even to this day, I can play that song and she stops and she just kind of smiles and looks at me, and she's 18 months now. And it's just the most amazing thing ever.
That is so amazing.
So those first few weeks, going back to what your question.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
No one can prepare you with, like, we could both like talk about what it's like, and you cannot be prepared for what that's like.
This is one of those things where you think you're prepared.
Mm-hmm.
No. Like it was just, so here's the thing that I think I've only talked about one other time.
Right.
And I get emotional talking about it because I just, to think about this and how I resented her. I resented Maya. I didn't connect with her for the first 4 weeks.
Wow. That's really brave of you to say that.
And I hate saying it out loud, but it's the truth, right? Like I didn't resent her like per se, but I resented the fact that this is very selfish for me to say, but I'm going to say it. I resented the fact that I wasn't getting my sleep. I like structure and I like my routine, and so I had none of that. And so because of that, I was very resentful because here was this, this new baby into our lives. And because of this baby, I didn't have any of that. And for me to say that out loud and for me to even think about that now, I feel terrible in saying it, but it's the truth. I did think that. And
it's also very, very common for moms and dads to feel that way. I think we just don't talk about it enough.
Well, when you mentioned earlier, you said, did you have support? I do have a very good friend of mine who you would know who he is, and he has 3 kids now. And I talked to him about this, and he's like, dude, that's exactly the same way that I felt. And I felt this like, oh, like really? Like this isn't crazy? Like this can be a normal thing. And so I'll never forget when that changed. It was a very distinct moment. So I will say, made the mistake of bouncing Maya on a stability ball because it was the only thing that would calm her down from very early on. And I say a mistake because then she got used to it and it was harder to break from sleeping and getting her to bed, all that other stuff.
Right. But at the time, you're just trying to figure out whatever.
I mean, we'll do anything. Anything that works. But I'll never forget one day I was bouncing her I was holding her and I was bouncing her on the ball. And she just looked up at me with her big eyes, and she started to smile. And I'll never forget that feeling. All that resentment and stuff I'd been feeling just melted away. And it was like 4 weeks, and I just felt that immediate connection there. But yeah, like I'm embarrassed to say, but at the same time, it's just the reality of what I was going through, and what I felt was, it was so hard, and I just resented the fact that, selfishly, I didn't have my routine and schedule and all this other stuff. But yeah, it was, not gonna lie, it wasn't easy.
It's not. But again, I think we don't do enough to normalize. And I don't even know if we consider a lot about dads in the postpartum period. I had a psychologist on, and she talked about how actually dads can go through kind of like a postpartum depression or anxiety as well. It's a trying time to have a new baby. I mean, it's lovely, It's beautiful, it's wonderful, but it's also challenging, especially for your first baby.
And I think I did go through that. I'm a very big proponent of therapy, and I sought out at the time, actually when Amy was pregnant, I sought out a therapist who specialized in men who were either just a new dad or about to become a dad. And he's still a therapist. He's still my therapist to this day, but like that's his specialty. And so that was part, and you asked me before, did I have a resource? Like he was a big resource for me to kind of like, from a therapy perspective, to kind of prepare me and just look at, from mind and all and psychology and all that stuff.
Right.
That was helpful. But after she was born and as I got back to see and over time, he did say, I do think you're experiencing some of postpartum. And I was like, what? Like, I thought that was only for women, but I've learned. And I did talk about it. I think, I don't know if it was my podcast or what have you. I talked about it one time. Oh, no, what it was? It was a Instagram post. I did a long post about it and I had so many people reach out to me and say, not enough guys talk about this. Not enough fathers talk about this. Like, please talk about this more because this is real stuff. And I was just like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
It's just my experience. And I talked about it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You'd be surprised. I'm sure you helped a ton of people that way because especially guys don't talk about these things as much. And then was your wife breastfeeding also? Because that also adds another level of stress potentially. How did that go?
She was, and we were very lucky and fortunate that Maya latched like right off the bat. I want to say like second try in the hospital, and
awesome.
and she latched, and so we went through a little bit of challenge there within the first couple of days, but for the most part, it was like it's been a
pretty smooth.
I'm speaking like it's been a great experience, like and she is still breastfeeding. We're almost 18 months, so today is the 4th. 18 months is on the 15th. We're coming down to where Amy's just not producing milk anymore. So I think Amy said the other day she's probably at about another month or maybe 6 to 8 weeks away. So we're getting down to that point. Maya's been done really, really well with it.
That's great. That's great. Because breastfeeding can sometimes be a challenge. I always personally call breastfeeding a labor of love. Like you do it because you want to do what's best for your children. But like your whole world starts to revolve around when is the next time you can pump? When do you have to go here? When do you have to go there? So to do it for 18 months is quite impressive.
And that was part of the first few weeks, again, adjusting like, what do you mean she has to feed every 2 hours or whatever it was? And
right.
And like that 2 hours starts when she begins. Like, I didn't understand, like, what are you talking about?
Yes.
Like, holy cow, she's eating all the time. And we did go through, some periods of, I did a little bit of bottle feeding in the middle of the night to give Amy a break, and she did okay with that. That wasn't bottle feeding, meaning like breast milk.
Sure.
She did okay with it for a while, but that was not something that we normally did just because she didn't love it. We also tried a night doula to come in. I think we tried it once and we didn't really sleep a whole lot, but just because it was just a weird experience for us, because we'd actually budgeted to have a month of a night doula, and we ended up never doing it. Just because, just other than that one time, just because, I don't know, it just something that we weren't really comfortable with, that a person that we didn't necessarily know who they were going to be in the house with our newborn baby.
Yeah, I can understand that.
For us, it was just like, we're a little bit more anxious and we're not getting the restful sleep, because one of my wife's best friends had it at a night doula and they were like, oh my God, it's the best thing ever. It's just, an example of different experiences for different people.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then did you do all this stuff like diaper changes, baths, all that kind of stuff?
I am a diaper changing machine. I had changed like one diaper when Maya was born. I think I changed one of my nephew's diapers like when he was a baby, but I had no idea what I was doing. And the funny thing, not funny, but like an interesting thing was Amy was like, yeah, don't forget you're wiping down. And I was like, what are you talking about? And she had to explain this to me. And I was like,
right.
Oh,
you don't want to get the poop up there. You want it to go.
I'm like, I would never have thought about that. And A buddy of mine, they just adopted a young baby girl, and I texted him. I was like, dude, one of the best things I can tell you, and I'm not going to give you advice unless you ask me, don't forget to wipe down. And it was just one of those things where I was like, oh, I would not normally think about this.
That is funny.
But you just kind of get into it and you're like, she's got to get cleaned up here. And honestly, like for the first little while, it's really not, like the poop and stuff isn't really. That was another thing too. I'm like, what do you mean it's not like normal looking poop? So, like again, you just kind of jump in and do it.
Right.
And then we did baths. That was one thing that we were kind of going back and forth on where we're like, well, do we give her baths every day? Like, is it like, but then the doctor was like, once a week is fine. And so I think in the early part, we did like once a week. And then we started to progressively get, maybe it was like twice a week. And we now give her a bath every day because it's part of our nighttime bedtime routine.
Right.
And I'm the bath guy. I'm the bath person. I give her a bath every night. I love it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fun. Fun times.
Yeah.
So just to wrap up, what would be like your favorite piece of advice that you would want to give to expectant dads?
I think just roll with as things are happening and try not to have an expectation in your mind of that it's going to be a certain way because it's almost guaranteed not to be that way. And just be open to the process and really, enjoy the process and try and be as present as possible. The whole, I hate the cliche, but it's so true. Someone told me early on, like, the nights are long, but the years are shorter, whatever it is. But somebody told me that like in the first month, and I was like, "Screw you!" Like,
yeah, like
you have no idea what I'm going through right now. Yeah, but it really is true because we look back, and I just said to Amy this morning, I just like, that's our daughter right there, and she's like running around, and here we are, 18 months later, like it's been like the blink of an eye. It really truly does go by super quickly. That does not help when you're in the middle of it. I realize that, and you've had no sleep. I'm like, I get it. But just try to be present to what's going on, enjoy the process, and try not to have too many expectations along the way, and just enjoy the ride because it really truly is amazing.
It is indeed. It is indeed. So where can people connect with you if they are interested in learning more about the things you offer for online business folks?
My podcast is a great place to start. It's called The Art of Online Business, and I'm on wherever you listen to podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, wherever. So the podcast, I'm on Instagram at Rick Mulready, and then my website is rickmulready.com, and we're currently undergoing a update to the site. So hopefully by the time that people visit, it'll look a lot nicer than it does right now. But
it doesn't look bad.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this because I told you this when we were talking about coming on, chatting through this. This is not something I normally talk about, but I love talking about it, and it's just because it's such a unique experience. And so, thank you for the opportunity.
Well, thank you for coming on. I really, really appreciate it, Rick. Thanks so much.
Absolutely.
Wasn't that a really fun episode? I so enjoyed that conversation, and I really appreciate his just honesty and not sugarcoating and keeping it real with us during the conversation. And I'm sure that you enjoyed it too. Now, after every episode, when I have a guest, I do something called Nicole's Notes, where I do my top 3 or 4 takeaways from the episode. So here are Nicole's notes from my conversation with Rick. Number 1, take a minute and check on your partner. As Rick mentioned, partners can have anxiety and worries and fears about pregnancy and birth, and maybe even things like postpartum depression. They may need to seek out professional help, even like with the therapist. So do take a moment and check in on your partner. Make sure that they are taking care of their mental health during the pregnancy, birth, and in the postpartum period as well. Number 2, I really liked how Rick talked about he wanted to be sure that the experience was his experience. And I definitely recommend that you do the exact same thing. Make the experience your experience. Now, of course, you need to get educated. You need to learn about labor and birth and the things to expect on all of that good, great stuff. But ultimately, it really needs to be your experience. So although you hear other people's experiences and you hear other stories and you certainly learn from that, go into it with an open mind. Birth is an unpredictable process. Every pregnancy, every birth is different. So make the experience your experience. And then the final thing that I want to say is that Rick talked in the beginning about thinking about in business how you have to work like crazy and hustle in order to get ahead. And he gave the example of his father and kind of learning those values that you have to work. But that actually isn't true, that you don't have to do those things. And I want to extend that analogy to getting ready for your pregnancy and motherhood. So during your pregnancy, you don't need to read like 50,000 books. You don't need to listen to every single podcast, read every single blog post, follow every single Instagram account. Find 3 or 4 resources that are valuable to you and provide you good information and stick with those. It doesn't have to be like an overwhelming work yourself crazy learning every single thing from every single person. And similarly, once you are a mother, there's going to be pressure, whether you put it on yourself or whether you feel pressure from society. There may be pressure to do all the things, to dress them up in the perfect outfits, to do photo shoots, to make perfect organic meals as they get older, volunteer at things, bake, arts and crafts, activities, all of those things. That doesn't have to be your story. If that's certainly what you want to do and that fuels you and you enjoy it, those things are enjoyable for you, then great. But don't feel like you have to do all of the hustle and bustle and things in order to be considered a good mother. It is your love is what is going to make you the best mother, and you can express that love in a myriad of different ways. So don't feel like you have to do like all the things and be like this perfect or picture perfect Joan Cleaver. If y'all even know who Joan Cleaver is from Leave It to Beaver kind of mother, you don't have to do that. Do what works for you. All right. So that is it for this episode of the podcast. Please do subscribe to the podcast in Spotify, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, wherever you're listening to me right now. And of course, I would love it if you leave an honest review, particularly in Apple Podcasts, because that really helps the show to grow. It helps other women find the show. You know, I am on a mission to reach and help as many women as possible. And I so appreciate your help in that mission and in that work of making sure that people have access to this information. So leave me that review in Apple Podcast, and I do shout outs. That's where I do the shout outs from as well. Also, don't forget to check out the other resources that I have for you beyond the podcast. Go to drnicolerankins.com/resources to check out those free guides that you can download: pain management guide, meditation, warning signs to look out for after birth, prenatal test. Those are just a few. Again, that's drnicolerankins.com/resources. Now, next week on the podcast, I am revisiting preeclampsia. That's a really important topic. So you definitely want to come on back next week. And until then, I wish you a beautiful pregnancy and birth. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the All About Pregnancy and Birth podcast. Head to my website, drnicolerankins.com, to get even more great information, including free downloadable resources on how to manage pain and labor and warning signs to look out for after birth. You'll also find information on my free online class on how to make a birth plan that works, as well as everything you need to know about my signature online childbirth education class, the Birth Preparation Course. Again, that's drnicolerankins.com, and I will see you next week.